All right.
Morning, everybody. After some crazy technical difficulty, mainly it's because it's on my part. I am in a different area of the world, and so that didn't really go very well. That's how we're gonna have to figure this out. But anyway, good morning and welcome to the Real HR Show. Normally live today, pre-recorded and put up after the fact. So good morning. I've got Suzanne Lucas with me. We're about 15 minutes behind set schedule, and unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. Good morning, you.
Yeah, because that's the problem with both of us being self-employed. We don't have an IT department.
No, we don't have a television production department. We don't have marketing and media. We just have
We have us.
That's right.
And we're very competent and capable.
That's right. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. So, how are you?
Well, all things considered, I'm pretty good. And I think right now I'm kind of glad to be living across an ocean.
In Switzerland? Yes.
Yes. Switzerland.
Yeah. Today we're talking about dealing with civil unrest. So, normally in the show, production-wise, which failed horribly, today we usually have where you can find us. So actually, if you want to reach out to us, we'll just give you a quick blast here. You can find me at bestpractices.work. That's my website. You can find me on LinkedIn on Brenda Neckbottle. You can find me on Instagram as Brenda the HR Lady. And after Suzanne swallows, she's going to tell you where you can find her.
You can find me on my website, evilhrlady.org, on Twitter at realevilhrlady. You can find me at LinkedIn. I'm Suzanne Lucas there, and you can join my Facebook group, which is Evil HR Lady. And if you Google Evil HR Lady or Suzanne Lucas, I will pop up. Another Suzanne Lucas will pop up who is a midwife. Please do not confuse me. I will not deliver your baby. No.
That's not a good thing.
Oh my
gosh.
I am not the person you want around if you go into labor. No. I'll be like, call me when the baby's all washed up and perhaps potty trained.
Yeah, duly noted. Gotcha. Oh, all right. That's a whole nother level of civil unrest. So with everything that's going on here in the U.S., which is kind of the reason why I'm out of my normal jive and mojo here on this is because of what has been happening. And down here in this area, it was a horrible thing that took place up in Minneapolis. And unfortunately, that frustration and anger and pent up energy, these people have had enough. So we know what's going on. They're rioting, they're looting, they're burning, and they're impacting the world. And we're already in a situation right now to where we've got enough going on, and now this is just adding more pressure to it. So we've got a lot of employees who were already once concerned and nervous about the condition of health, condition of the economy, and now they're added a whole new level of concern about their safety. And I had quite an incident Friday night. We had protesters here literally 20 yards off of my doorstep, which thankfully it was peaceful, but I know very well that that these crowds are being salted with provocateurs, and that's what's happening, is that they're coming in, they're coordinated, and then they actually, as we're finding out in the news, which I knew was happening already, what's happening is that people are being bussed in who are on a mission to create and wreak havoc. This is something that law enforcement has intel on. They monitor, they watch this, but nonetheless, we don't know when it's going to show up or where. And the only thing that we can count on is that all hell is going to break loose.
And
so that makes life really interesting.
Scary.
It does.
It's super scary, and I am firmly of the belief that most people are good people who want to do the right thing. And I think most people that go out to protest are going out to protest for the right reason. But you bring a few of these outside agitators in,
Mhm.
and things go crazy and it's
Yes,
dangerous.
it is.
And this is something that we have to deal with, not only as a people, but as HR managers.
Right. And this is where normally companies are looking to HR to have that seat at the table. Your microphone, just so you know, is clicking up against your necklace.
Oh, how incredibly
It's
annoying.
It's pretty, but it's clicking.
I was trying to be fancy today.
You look great. You look great.
Because I'm normally not fancy.
No, you're fine. You don't have to hold it up. There you go. Just hold still.
All right.
There. Perfect. There you go. So anyway, sounded like
Yeah.
Morse code at one point.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Sorry,
it's all good.
That's the last time I tried to look fancy. All right.
No, look
back
fancy.
to topic.
It's all good. Back to the topic. So
this is looking to HR, and HR, we're not necessarily prepared for all of this kind of a thing. And I just, right before we went live, I was just reading my friend Dan Schwartz's LinkedIn post, and there was two things that he wrote about. And the one he just mentioned in passing, which was a letter from the governor of Connecticut saying, if your workplace is not safe, your job is protected if you don't go in. The letter was written about COVID, and the whole thing is about COVID and what qualifies as unsafe, blah, blah, blah. But I thought, wow, we're dealing with the same unsafe from a different angle right now. It's not just I might get sick, it's I might get hit in the head with a brick, or maybe the workplace is safe, but how do I get home? And there's lots and lots of things that people are really, really worried about right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would agree. And it's, not every HR person knows what to do. If you've been in this game long enough, you've dealt with enough stuff that you have a general sense of what needs to happen. And then there are companies that invest quite a bit of money into these contingency plans, and people get trained. We work with our marketing department or public relations or whatever, so that way we can align the messages both internally and externally. But if you're in that situation where, in your group specifically yesterday, and I loved this because I jumped in on the conversation, and that is, somebody had asked that, they were just frustrated, and they're like, I just want to have a safe place for my employees to, talk about what's on their mind and, relay, so that they can just kind of like process it. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing the question, right?
Right.
But I asked her, and I said, can you give some more, help me understand what you mean by allowing them to do this? Like, give me some clarity. And she just didn't really dive in too much. She just wanted a place where people can just air their grievances about what's going on in the world. And, quite a few people actually chimed in. Some companies have stuff, some companies don't. And people just really have no idea. But then one person in particular took my answer, which is great. I'm happy I did it. And I responded in kind that, yes, in fact, that, this was the answer that I was going to give. And that was, employers are not equipped, nor employers really are the appropriate field to go ahead and do this. However, connect with your EAP program and work with them to determine, what kind of services or what kind of things are available for people to talk to. And I chimed back in and said, yes, that is exactly, I said, that's perfect. Because first off, employers are not clinicians. First and foremost, we're not psychiatrists. We're not trained to deal with these things. This is not what we do. We're in business to chase after the money for the things that we're good in. That's what business is about, and that's what employers are for. And so, if an employer starts, gathering people around and say, okay, go ahead and offset and air, they're not trained to facilitate that kind of conversation. In addition to that, once they have the information, they need to act on it if anything comes up. And if they don't act on it, that opens them up for risk. And then finally, there's an ADA element in here that a lot of people don't think about. If so we know under American with Disabilities Act that nobody has to disclose their disability. They don't have to discuss anything about it. Well,
Sure.
we do have people in the workplace that have disabilities and they don't disclose them, and we know that. And typically it's not an issue because they handle it themselves and there's no need to ask for an accommodation. There's no need to discuss it. It's just a no need situation. But
Right.
so let's say, for example, what I gave is that, let's say, for example, somebody has like significant anxiety and it is a condition. And an
Absolutely.
event like what took place triggers that anxiety, and that person now reveals that. You're walking into, as an employer, and demonstrates it, right? And the employer is now walking into a regarded as scenario, which means that if you are regarding a person as having a disability, that person is now protected. And I'm not saying don't regard them as having a disability, but what I'm saying is that you don't want to be in a position as an employer to discover something that you wouldn't have discovered under normal circumstances.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of reasons to want to be careful. The ADA thing, like you said, is one that people don't think about. And the other thing is, you start a conversation, you don't know where it's going to go.
Right.
And if you have, somebody who's trained in facilitating this kind of discussion, then it can be fine. But you don't have someone like that.
No.
And I'm even going to guess that most HR managers, including myself, are not trained in how to handle these really complex issues. I mean, there are some issues that are really really clear. Nobody, police or otherwise, should be murdering anybody, and the police should not be targeting anybody by race, and that's all very clear. But there's far more to it, and people aren't going to all agree. And then what can of worms do you open up in the office?
Right. Yeah, it's going to get complicated, and you're going to wind up, and your work population isn't going to be all one demographic. Everybody comes from different backgrounds. Sorry if I'm shaking my camera. Different backgrounds, different worldviews, different opinions, different political affiliations. I mean, if you really want to erode whatever culture you have, go down this road. Seriously, if you really want to have significant problems, have these open conversations, because that's exactly what you're going to get. If you have a culture, interesting morning here this morning. If you have a culture to where people are conditioned to have these open conversations and you hear it taking place, I think that's great. But I think you guys also have to continue to push the message that it's business as usual today, because we have stuff to do.
I think, though, it's also important to make sure that you're not jumping in and trying to stop something if they're talking not just about world events, but how it plays out within the company. Because we have to let people discuss their workplace conditions, and that's protected, right? And so if someone says, because of A, it made me think B, and that B is something within the company, now you've just changed from talking about world events to talking about current workplace conditions. And that's something that we also have to be careful about, is making sure that employees know that they can always talk about workplace conditions.
Yes.
I mean, within reason. They're not entitled to talk about it with customers, but amongst themselves, you can't stop employees from discussing their workplace conditions. And a lot of people are going to say, this is with my workplace conditions, and this is going to be for people who are working in these big cities where these things are happening, and in these smaller cities where there are riots happening. It's affecting your workplace.
Yeah.
And it makes it a really difficult line to draw of what is current events, which we don't need to discuss, although people may want to, and what is workplace condition. And, one of the questions is going to come up of, I don't feel safe coming to work right now.
Yep.
And that's something that we have to deal with as employers. We can't just say, well, come in or you're fired. There needs to be more involved.
Yeah, and focusing on the business of the day, what you're talking about is when I'm referring to focusing on the business of the day, I'm talking about, work is a good distraction for people. It gets their minds off of the rest of the world, and being able to keep people's eyes focused in on what needs to be done gives them that mental break from thinking about the chaos and what's happening, and it's actually very healthy for them. But at the same time, yes, it is if you see somebody talking about something inappropriately, then that's really where to plug in the, okay guys, look, hear what you're saying, we got to keep focusing on what's happening. But if you got people that are asking questions and talking about, well, what is this company doing for us, what are we going to do, but those are the appropriate conversations to have.
Right. And those things need to happen, and employees need to be able to feel safe within their company. And right now, everybody is feeling stressed out to the max. Everyone has got things coming at them from all angles right now. And I'm concerned that I don't want any of this anger to spill over into your workplace. And even if it's righteous anger, I don't want it to spill over into your workplace. It doesn't go well. It's not something that will make your business better and make your employees happier. And you need to keep in mind that all laws regarding racial discrimination and harassment still stand. Yep. So you've got to be clear that bad behavior, no matter what side it's coming from, is not tolerated.
No, it's not. And that was the question that was posed to me is, in the Next Gen Women in HR Facebook group that I run, I last Thursday when all of this first started and we had the the image of what was going on at that Target that literally got torched. I put in there, it's like, this is a very real situation and I think this is appropriate to start talking about, but what would you do if this was your business? Start thinking through these things. And where I was going with is that, obviously your employees get cleared out. What does it look like with big box retail? You want to reach out to, your team to make sure, do a head count, make sure everybody's fine, get a hold of people, because employees they won't know what to do and they won't know what to say. So that was the crux of the exercise. But one of the things that came out in a private conversation, a little sidebar with me, is what if you find out that one of your employees got involved and they got swept up in this? And you know what? It may happen. I'm not saying it will, but it absolutely may happen. Not all employees that work are happy, just in general in life. And right. Some people may see this as an opportunity if they didn't like a certain decision, or if they're upset at a manager, or didn't like another coworker, or just quite frankly wanted to be part of history. They may get caught up in something like that. And, if you become aware of that, then you have to deal with it appropriately.
And how would you deal with it?
Very carefully.
That's a good answer. There is a whole lot of very carefully going on around that. And caught up in it can mean different things. If someone is going and protesting, depending on your state, there may be laws protecting them. If someone is throwing bricks or lighting buildings on fire or stealing things, there's no law protecting them. Right. We have the right to protest, but we don't have the right to destroy. And in some states, not all, you can be protected for those activities. In Colorado, for instance, you're protected for anything you do outside of work that is legal, except for marijuana usage. And So someone going to a protest, as long as they are behaving legally within that protest, you can't discipline, fire, whatever that person,
Right.
no matter what they're protesting.
Right.
It doesn't matter what side they're on, that's protected. California, you're protected for political speech. So these protests can absolutely be considered political speech. I would be very hesitant to do anything against someone who is protesting, no matter what their position is, in California or Colorado. But once they start throwing bricks or lighting things on fire, those protections go away.
Right. And, you know, years ago, I had a client that called me up. It was the HR person, and she literally like had to go out to her car to have this conversation with me, and from her cell phone. And she goes, "Okay, I have a very strange question to ask you." And I'm like, "Well, nothing in HR is strange. Go ahead." And she goes, she goes, "Our bosses," and this is when the prior administration was up for the second term. And she said, yeah, the owner of the company just went through and had an all hands meeting and pretty much told everybody that if they failed to vote a certain way, that they were no longer going to be welcomed in this company.
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, so we need to talk about that." And she goes, "Yeah, he's not going to talk to you about it. And he's already made it abundantly clear he's having a bad day, he's mad. And he's pretty much told everybody that if they don't vote a certain way, they're fired." And about 48 hours later, I get a phone call from him. He says, "Okay, I've like totally messed up." And I said, "Yeah, you kind of did." So here's how we fix it. So, because, you know, but that's the thing is, like, to back up what you're saying, you can't tell your employees how to behave outside of the walls of your company, with the exception of if they are representing your organization, if they're in your business, if they're in your company attire, if they're attending an event where they're promoting themselves as being your employee. Yes, there are certain expectations that you can put on them, but you can't tell everybody what to do in life. It's just, you can't do it.
It's very important that we let our employees have their own lives. And,
Yes.
you know, there are some caveats. We all watched last week drama with Amy Cooper, who was the woman who called 911 and saying that a African-American man was threatening her. And she ended up losing her job for that. She wasn't representing her company at the time, but it became very public. She was an executive.
Right.
And there's no way the company could continue to operate and have trust in her because of that. And she was terminated. Now, do I think that she actually walked away with nothing? No. I'm pretty sure that her lawyers are working with company lawyers and she'll walk away with money, but the rest of us are not quite so lucky. There are times when we terminate for people who do things out of work and not related to work. But for the most part, if you should be allowed to have your life. You should be allowed to have your life, as long as you're not breaking the law, at which case I'm losing sympathy for you.
Well, and you know, I think when you're talking about executives are constantly representing the company. I think, you know, a company that takes that kind of action to terminate an executive who is at the apex, the tip of the sword, you know, they're constantly have the ability to impact business and a lot of everything that they do in the public eye. Yeah, it's absolutely appropriate. It's absolutely appropriate.
That is true. That is true. Executives are at a different standard. They are.
Yeah.
And they should be.
Are.
They should be.
Yeah.
They get the big bucks. They should be held to that different standard.
Yeah.
A different standard.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and one of the other things I want to discuss, do you want to talk about that?
Go ahead.
Is the logistics part of dealing with riots and things like that. A lot of businesses aren't prepared, and we kind of live in this, oh, that happens someplace else. And most of the time it does happen someplace else. This is kind of a unique situation where it's happening all over the United States.
Yeah.
As far as I know, every state or almost every state has had a protest that has morphed into something violent. And people that aren't prepared for this are suddenly having to deal with it. And are your plans ready and prepared? This morning I was reading on Reddit, which I know 90% is made up, but this sounded plausible. A guy who was the head of security at a retail store in Manhattan, as the crowds are coming in and he's trying to know what to do. He's talking to one person, his staff is talking to another person from corporate. They're getting mixed messages and nobody knows what the proper plan is for this. And this was a security team and they weren't prepared. Yeah. And security sometimes falls under HR and it sometimes doesn't. But regardless, we're responsible for people. And if I can't get my people out safely, that's a huge concern to me. I am concerned about buildings and physical things, but not nearly the way I'm concerned about people. And so, do you have plans in place? And you probably don't. I admit, in all of my time in corporate HR, I never worried about a riot plan. I just, was there someone that had a plan for it? Probably. We were a big company and somebody maybe did, but I certainly didn't know about it. Yeah. And in smaller companies, that's sitting squarely on the shoulders of HR. Do you have a plan? Like you were saying, do you have a way to contact everybody to make sure that they're safe? And, you know, do you have contact lists that you can access at home? And we can now a lot more easily than we could 20 years ago. Yeah. But who's responsible for that? Do you want that to be done? I do. If I'm HR for a store that protesters started smashing windows and grabbing stuff, I want to make sure that every single one of my employees is safe. Yeah. And I want to find every one of them to make sure that they're safe. Yeah. And are we prepared for that? Do we have a plan?
A lot of people aren't. You know, a lot of people don't. You know, when you've been like, I've got a lot of background from doing security work, from having just, you know, exposure to understanding, you know, how to make a significant plan like that. I mean, I worked for Fortune 500 companies, so I had, you know, an understanding that there are contingency plans, and, you know, I work with loss prevention, and, you know, our HR team is massive. And so, you know, if something like that happened, and, you know, we've got a whole corporate division that people can jump in and start supporting you, right? So, you know, there are those things that are in place. Even when I was, you know, going for my bachelor's degrees, I spent time putting together and taking classes on how to put these things together. A lot of people don't think about learning how to do that. You know, I attend active shooter training. I've got a really great podcast episode that's on hold right now, and that's probably going to come up here real soon. And as we reprogram, now that we're dealing with this, on how to, you know, what happens when you as an HR pro are going through an active shooter situation. I'm not talking about run, hide, and fight. I'm talking about when you're in it, like when it's happening. You know, what should you expect afterwards? Because a lot of the training that's out there, they don't talk about that, right? They don't tell you they don't tell you the real thing. So people don't think through things. And I think people need to be aware that you have to get away from the conversation of, that's not going to happen here. That will never happen to me, because right now this world is telling us that it may very damn well likely happen to you. You know, there's a higher chance of it. So take time to start thinking through, like when you see a situation happening, start running in your head all of the potential scenarios. And not to strike up fear and panic, but it's like, okay, so this is coming at me. How do I deal with this? What do I do? What's the best option? How do we say? Remember years ago, when I worked at ADP, I was the only HR person in the building. And I wasn't an HR person for ADP. I was a HR business partner servicing clients. And we had a funnel cloud come over. And the way our office was lined up was just like, it was just complete windows, right? And people are just standing out there like looking out the window, and it's green outside, and I'm watching people, and I'm watching managers, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, what? And she's like, oh my God. And I'm like, everybody away from the window, move now, into the bathroom, go. And this thing was just about ready to come down on us. Thankfully, it missed us. But, the hail started coming, they started seeing the debris, and I'm like, out now, move, let's go, right? Shoving everybody we can into the hallways and, anywhere there wasn't a window. And people are just, then they get done with it, and they're laughing, and they're just, like that off gas of that stress and trauma. And the woman looked at me, she goes, I wouldn't have known what to do. And I go, baby doll, it's common sense. I said, you got people surrounded by windows, get them out. You don't have to worry about anything else. Just get them to a safe place. Just do that.
Well, I think right there when she said, I didn't know what to do. The thing is if you gave her a quiz that said, what do you do? She would have gotten the right answer.
Yeah.
But in the moment, there's a couple of things going on there. One, there's panic. And two, people often are unsure of what they are allowed to do at work.
Yes. Thank you for saying that.
I'm not the boss. So is it okay if I run and hide in the bathroom, which is more secure? I don't want to get in trouble.
Yes.
Or I don't want to look bad, or I need to wait until the boss tells me what to do. And we see a lot of that in business in a lot of situations.
Yes.
From
yes, we do.
Everything from dealing with this, with the kind of stuff we're talking about, to dealing with a spat between two employees. People don't know when they are allowed to step in. And there are times when you don't want people to step in, but we also need to make sure, and I hate the word empowered, but I'm going to use it here. We want to make sure people are empowered to know that it's okay to get out of the path of a tornado.
Yes.
Even if you're in a call center, which are notorious for having terrible work practices, and you're in the middle of a call, you see the tornado coming towards you, you should be getting up and running. And furthermore, the business shouldn't punish you. Now, unfortunately, I know that some managers out there would say, well, it didn't hit, so everybody should have stayed seated. And that's not a thing that you want.
Right.
It is absurd, but there are terrible, terrible managers out there. It's important that employees know what they can and can't do. And what they can do is protect themselves.
Yeah.
And they
can
act. They can act.
Yes. This morning, so we had another round we had some protests yesterday, not a lot, but we had people, they bloomed up in a few areas. But this morning when I checked in, because to be honest with you, I've been sleeping in my clothes the last 2 nights because I don't know where these things are come up. And I already had a good scare Friday, right?
Right.
So
right.
I'm ready. It's like, I've got my safety plan in place. It's just me, I'm lucky I don't have to, shuttle kids and family out the door, but even still, it's just me. I'm a single female in a beautiful place, in a beautiful, part of the world. But at the same time, stuff happens. It doesn't,
right.
Life won't discriminate, right? It just doesn't.
Right.
And so anyway, I checked the news this morning to see what was going on. I finally, fell asleep last night after I felt that, everything was pretty much calm and it was not going to be a crazy wild night as it was the prior night. And I woke up this morning to read an article about how all of the 7-Elevens were shut down. All the convenience stores were shut down in the Virginia Beach area, with the exception of a convenience store that was remaining open. And that was past, we have an 8 p.m. curfew, and how it was full of people that shouldn't have been out and about. And it was actually being operated by 2 females. And they were terrified. I mean, they were nervous. They were very, very scared. And the first thing that went through my mind is that I bet you 10 to 1 if those ladies didn't show up to work, they are of the mindset that they would have been fired, which they likely probably would have.
Right.
Because if anybody's leaving a store open with just 2 females running it in the middle of a curfew when we've got a national crisis on our minds, yeah, they likely would have been terminated for something like that. But these women also probably don't realize that, and they may not be in a financial situation where they can do something about it. I mean, they probably really do rely on these jobs. And that is that they could have not shown up and picked their safety, but that would have meant that they would have had, it would have taken longer for them to be able to get pay again if they were let go, because they have to go out and find a new job. And, you know, it's the first month rent is due. So, you know, it's a hard, ugly situation.
It is a hard, ugly situation. And one of the things that I realize is that the people with the highest salaries have the most flexibility on things like this.
I agree.
And, you know, when I lived in Philadelphia for 10 years, and when it snows in Philadelphia, the world comes to an end, right? We get a half an inch of snow and everybody panics. The highly paid white collar worker says, it's snowing, I'm working from home today. The 7-Eleven clerk gets in her car and drives on the icy roads to work. And that's how it is. And we've seen this play out over and over again during the COVID pandemic with the essential workers. A lot of people that we label essential are low paid. And so the white collar people are at home working, and the grocery store clerks making $8, $9, $10 an hour are at work. And businesses, I think, really need to be aware of what they need to do to protect their employees in all situations. You know, the governor of Colorado released that thing saying, here, if you're not following the COVID standards, you need to stay home, and you won't have to lose your job. But we also need to think, if there's a riot going on, we need to make sure that our 7-Eleven workers are, and I don't want to pick on 7-Eleven, but any company, that their first concern is their employees.
Yeah. But unfortunately, not everybody's going to be like that. And, you know, I don't know if it, and I'm going to counter with it also include that not only is it the individuals with a higher income, it also higher salary, but it's also their personal situation. So, you know, if they don't have to work a full-time job, you know, if they have a spouse that brings in more money, and, you know, these are their life choices, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It impacts multiple people. But I think what's important too is that, as you guys can see, is that, you know, as we're talking through this, if you've noticed that we haven't stuck to just one side of the conversation. And anybody who's been in HR long enough and worth their salt does what we're doing right now, and that's looking at all sides. We're taking in consideration of the employees, and we're talking about it, and we're taking in consideration of the company, and we're talking about it. These are not easy problems to solve, and sometimes they're I've always been of the belief that there's always an answer to every business situation, but now we're dealing with these outside influences, you know, the state of civil unrest, and that makes the waters muddier. And there may not necessarily be an immediate answer, but there's always something that businesses can do to protect their employees, to make sure that they get educated, have drills. There's nothing wrong with doing a drill. Just do not do an active shooter drill unless you actually work with law enforcement to prepare for something like that. Just don't do that, because the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI don't like that. You'll find out quickly. So just letting you know, you know, but you know, there's
not a
nothing
mistake you want to
wrong.
make.
No, but there's nothing wrong with preparing. There's nothing wrong with, you know, helping your people understand this is what it looks like. This is what it feels like, right? Because when it actually happens, it'll be very different. But you get that quote unquote muscle memory into their system. Years ago, when I worked for big box retail, we did a code blue drill, which is what happens when a child has gone missing in the store. And I took a stuffed toy and I hid it somewhere in the side. It's like, okay, here's your target. And I held him up. I said, this is who we're looking for right now. This is who you're looking for. You can't pull this off the shelf and tell me that this is what it is, because there's only one. I said, this is who we're looking for. And everybody stayed at the front of the store, and I went deep into the store and I hid it. And I spent about 3 minutes just walking around, because I didn't want anybody to figure out that it was a quick and easy find. And I said, you guys have exactly 2 minutes to find the child. And that's because we need to do a quick, thorough sweep of the store in 2 minutes. We have enough people to do that. Go. So they did. And I made the call over the, you know, did the drill, made the call, and I said, extending to 5-minute search. And it caught everybody off guard, because I threw in an element of surprise. So they extended it to a 5-minute search. Nobody came back with it. Nobody came back with our target. And I said, let me show you. I said, this you guys should have found. And I went back and I walked over to where there was a dog crate, and I reached in and I pulled it out. I said, you guys didn't look. You just swept the store. And they're like, and the reality just set in. It was like, but that was so easy. And I said, this is a child. They're going to make it easy. If there's a child in the store missing, they're hiding somewhere, and you have to look, right? If it's a child that's been abducted, that's a different situation, right? Because you can look and you won't find them. And then they understood. So then I went and I hit it again in a different spot. Of course, everybody goes to the original spot thinking that, you know, they're going to outsmart me. It was no. But I found another spot and I hit it differently. And this time they found it, you know. So it was like, okay, we get it, you know. And then I gave them a chance to talk about it. I'm like, what did you learn? You know, like, and it's like the reality of it set in. And so you make it a really great opportunity. You just don't, you know, you just don't do a fire drill. Everybody goes outside and then they stand around and chatter and wait, blah, blah, blah. Have a secondary position, have a tertiary position, throw in elements that people don't understand, that people would never expect to have happen. You know, that's real incident training, because what you're doing is you're breaking down those mental barriers of, okay, the fire alarm's going off, plug my ears, walk out. No, fire alarm goes off. You're going to smell it. You're going to hear it. You're going to feel it. You're going to be encapsulated by smoke. You're going to have people with very low mobility that aren't going to be able to make it out of that building. I remember we did one, and I'm yammering and I'm so sorry, but I'm like on a really great tangent right now. We were on the 5th floor of this building, and I asked, when we were doing, I knew this fire drill was coming, and I had somebody who had a respiratory condition, so participating in a drill couldn't do it. So we got her waived from the drill. Anyway, we had these women. I mean, this one woman was, you know, 5'2", and she was 400 pounds and was a whiz bang at her job. A very nice lady. But there's no way she could have participated by going down the stairs and getting out. And I said, so what are we doing with these individuals? And they said, well, they can go ahead and wait in the stairwell for fire and rescue. And I looked over at my boss and I'm like, if they go and they wait in that fire and rescue, they will never be found. So what they did as part of the drill is they lined up chairs along the wall so these women could sit. And I'm like, and wait to die? You know, it's like those chairs aren't going to be there when there's a real fire. It's like, so anyway, I won't go over the cliff on that one. But what I'm saying is that, you know, when you're doing stuff like this, when you're educating your employees, because you should, and if you don't, that's your choice. But if you are, you know, get people and get your employees involved, have them start brainstorming. It's like, well, okay, so we went to our primary and then you pushed us back to our secondary. I said, yeah. And they said, well, why did you do that? And I said, because our primary was too close to where the scene was. And we would have been pushed back by law enforcement and rescue. So we need another place where we can meet and we can get a head count. And then we'll determine, how do we get you guys out of here? Because your cars are in the garage. And oh yeah, by the way, that's on fire too. Right? I said, there's all these things to think about. So.
And thinking about them is not what makes them happen. And I think people we want to live in our blissful bubbles, because you know what? Most likely your building isn't going to burn down. But somebody's will, and we don't know whose. And so everybody needs to be prepared. Most likely a riot isn't going to happen outside your door, but there will happen outside someone's door, and it might be you. And so you need to be prepared, and you need to think through all of these things. Right now, I feel like HR generally, we feel like we're all going to explode. You know, there's just so much information piled on us, so many changes, so many everything right now. And it's giving us this to-do list, and we might want to push it off. But it's not something we should push off. We need to be prepared, and hopefully we're prepared now. But if we're not prepared now, we need to be prepared for the next time. And hopefully there is no next time.
Yeah.
And I really hope that there is none.
Yeah.
But there might be.
Yeah, the reality is that there may likely be at some point.
There will be a next time for somebody, and it might be you.
Yeah.
It might be.
And I love that. I love how you phrase that. And you know, that's one of these things. If you push that off, you are going to wish that you never did that when you're faced with it.
Right. And I'm also going to say, this is the place where the finance people are like, what's my return on investment here? This is too expensive. What you want to do? What? And you need to be able to articulate clearly why you want to do it and why it's worth the cost. And like you were saying, if you want to do an active shooter training, you need to do it with the FBI or local police department or whatever, so that nobody gets really killed in a practice. You need to plan these things out in advance. You need to have approvals. You need to get all your I's dotted and T's crossed. You need to have these safety plans in place for what happens when people start throwing bricks through your windows. What do you do?
Yeah.
I mean, right now, stores know that it's going to be happening, and people are boarding up and shutting down, and governors have done curfews. And hopefully that will resolve the issues. But that first night, nobody knew it was coming. Nobody knew.
Nope.
And
absolutely.
And are you prepared?
Yeah.
Are
so one of the things that you guys can do, and then we're gonna wrap this up because we're at the top of the hour, which we normally would have closed. But one of the things that you guys can do is there's a course that I'm going to be offering here real soon. It's going to be a course on demand. It's part of my Best Practices HR University. It's going to go, I'm going to host it today in the Next Gen Women in HR Facebook group. And it's really going to talk about, it ponies back to what you were saying, Suzanne, about how to get buy-in. And what the course is called is How to Sell HR to Your Boss. And you can use this approach because this is one of the things where you do need, if you want to proceed with something like this, you do need the full weight of the backing from whoever your CEO is or whoever your top level executive in order to make these things happen. So if you're considering it, you guys can go ahead and dial into that. It'll be out in probably a week. You can find that on, it's something that I've been using for years. I got taught how to do something similar to it in 2013, and I've adapted it. And, you know, I can get about 80% of my agenda pushed and out the door using this approach. And it's a professional business approach. because we are HR people, and when we see something that needs to be done, it rides our call to action button hard, hard. And this is an area where it rides mine hard. So the timing is perfect to talk about this and to really kind of get some education on how to do that. So please keep your eyes open. You can find it on bestpractices.org. When, you know, if you want to learn more about it, go ahead and sign up on my list. Go to bestpractices.org, click on connect, and a link to that best practice will be in your inbox in about a week or so. And Suzanne, where can, is there anything that you're offering or providing as far as blogs and stuff like that where people can also take away info?
At the moment, based on this specific preparedness, I'm not doing anything at the moment. I am doing a webinar in a week on returning to work with COVID. And this is a webinar that I have already done 3 times. And normally you can do the same webinar over and over again, but I have to rewrite it each time because everything changes.
Thing changes.
And so if you think you know what you're doing, come take the webinar anyway, because it's probably different. It'll be different in 10 days than it is today.
Yeah, give it a week. It'll all change.
Give it a week. We'll see.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for hanging in there today. I'm sorry about the technical issue, and next week it'll all be back to normal where we get our flashy things that coming from. I know, right? No, it will be. Think positive.
It will be.
That's right, it will be. So you guys have a really, really great day. Thanks for joining us again. And we will be live and be able to answer your questions next week as well.
Bye.
Bye.